Hi, welcome to VUA 337's video on strategy. So the purpose of this video is to provide the theoretical background for Chapter 2, which is all about firm strategy and how it needs to be aligned really with operations strategy and some of the decisions that a firm might make and how that might then affect the related operations strategy. When you start this video, you want to have in front of you the handout that goes along with Chapter 2, which should look a little bit like this right here. Let me just show it to you. And actually yours is going to look like that, and that is located, of course, in Blackboard. And we'll get going with that. Once you have that, you're ready to go. So as a starting point, I just want to talk to you about what strategy is. So strategy is just this idea that in an organization, we try to do a particular set of broad objectives. It isn't really the day-to-day thing as much as it is these broad strategic, if you will, objectives. And these things are not as quote-unquote nebulous as a mission, but really these are not the day-to-day activities. For example, you may have a strategy that means that says, you know, that you want to graduate from college. It doesn't necessarily come up in your day-to-day life, but a lot of the decisions that you make, like when you take your classes and how much you work and, you know, I don't know, a variety of things, all kind of fit with that strategy. So strategy is a broad term that sort of outlines a firm's behavior. So if you kind of keep that in mind as we go through this, it might make some of this stuff seem a little bit clearer, let's just say. So just to give you, you know, some examples, I think the text does a really nice job of tying this to stuff that actually matters. So basically, operations managers, they need to understand that the world's a pretty global place, and you have to understand that things are coming from all over the place and how they're going to get there, what's important about them, where it is best to produce this or that. All of those sorts of things are really important. So we could talk for a minute about the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which is this gigantic airplane that actually was designed in a time when gas was less expensive. Then it was actually released when gas was very expensive and it didn't go over very well. But be that as it may, and we can debate the good and the bad of the Dreamliner, but what's important for you in this class is that the Dreamliner itself was built, like it says here, across 12 countries. The range was 8,300 miles of the world. The parts for the Dreamliner were actually made in. So, of course, this supply chain is really important. So that just brings to light the global nature of the world we live in. The Dreamliner is just an example. Another place, IKEA, you know, we all love IKEA, a furniture store. Their stores, they have stores in 48 countries, and so they have to deal with like the laws and the governments of all these different countries. So when about a year ago we had all this discussion about raising the minimum wage, well, for stores like IKEA, and there are many others, this became a pretty complex thing because, okay, do we just raise the wages, minimum wages in, you know, the US, or do we raise them everywhere? You know, all of those kinds of things. So the point of all this is, as an operations manager, you have to be kind of aware of what's going on in the world, because world trade is not going anywhere and it's very much a part of our life. And so much so that the GDP of the world has grown, you know, considerably over the last, say, 20 years. So you notice, like from this graph, this is just something I picked up on the internet just to sort of illustrate the point. World trade as a percentage of the GDP. So you can see that, you know, I have it in two different ways, in constant and in nominal dollars here, but it has grown as a percent from 20% to 40%, you know, depending on you know, which scale you use. Either way, you know, one's adjusted and one isn't. But If you think about your purchasing power or something like that, I mean, you know, it's like from 20% to 40%. Wow, that's a huge increase, right? And we can use our skills that we learned in chapter 1 about percent increases, right? And we can determine exactly what percent increase this is, right? To go from say 20 to 41%, what percent increase is that? Let's just do that real quick. So let's just say that we use 39% instead of 41. It just makes it easier. So I don't know why this didn't erase very well, but anyways, so 39% minus 20% divided by 20, right? So new minus old divided by old is an increase of 95%. If we go to 41%, you know, it's over 100%. The point being, global trade has really impacted the world that we all live in. Okay, so we've established that a lot of firms go global, but some of you might be asking yourself, why? Why did we all of a sudden, all these firms go do all this global trade stuff? Well, here's some of the reasons. So I'm going to tell you, just kind of run through them all, and then I'm going to talk to you about each one of them. So you could read this in the books. You could, you know, make some notes now on your handout, you know, however you want to handle it. But, you know, you're welcome to stop and start the video or whatever you need to do. So, of course, to improve supply chains, to reduce costs, and we have these various different trade agreements. That's what those are underneath. And then we find it improves operations. It helps us understand the markets that we function in. It improves the products because we are living in the place where the product is being used, so that makes more sense. It helps us reduce costs and attract and maintain global talent. So let's just talk then a little bit about what I mean when I say improving supply chain operations. So when we talk about improving supply chains, one of the things we think about is we can locate facilities in countries where like unique resources are available. Maybe it's water, maybe it's some particular knowledge, something like that. When we talk about some particular knowledge, things like human resource expertise, you know, low labor costs, raw materials, whatever. So athletic shoes, for example, they're mostly produced in Guangzhou. Now, they used to be produced in Korea, but this other place has become the mecca of athletic shoes. And so if we produce our athletic shoes there, we have a lot of sort of institutional knowledge that's just around the place, so it makes some sense. So that's why we improve our operations by doing it, you know, in a place where everyone else is doing it. It just makes some sense. Now, because labor in general is very expensive and often a big part of the cost in producing goods, we have to think about all the related pieces of costs. And so these 4 things are just 4 examples of tariffs that have been changed because of agreements that we've made. So remember, the topic here is why have we gone so global? Well, in the last 20 or 30 years, we've come up with these different trade agreements that make it a lot easier. So that this all reduces the overall cost. So maquiladors are sort of like free trade zones, and they allow manufacturing, for example, to pay taxes on just what is done in the other country. So instead of having to pay import taxes on the whole car, let's just say, if all that is done is, say, the engine block is put in the country, then we only have to pay taxes on what actually occurred in the other country. And maquiladors are just specific to the border of the U.S. and Mexico. And to put it more clearly, I guess, we just pay taxes on the value added in Mexico. The next one there is World Trade Organizations, WTO, and just in general, like in 1940, we paid about 40% in tariffs, whereas today it's more like 3%. So you can see that really helped. Then there's NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which kind of is working to sort of phase out even more tariffs between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada as well. Now, since the new presidency, perhaps this is going to be different, but for now it is the same. And then there's the European Union. And again, we don't know the effect of Brexit, but the idea was to reduce some of the trade barriers amongst the European countries that were participating in the EU. Such decisions like the EU allows some standardization across the countries, and so it makes trade a lot easier, right? Because everybody is using the euro, and we don't have to then convert the euro to the dollar to the whatever. We can just shoot the stuff back and forth, and it just makes life a little bit easier. It also creates some standards when we have stuff like this. One of the issues Americans get up in arms about this is if we produce the stuff in another country, but they have totally different, say, sanitation standards or child labor laws or, recycling or hormone-free foreign products or whatever. So stuff like the European Union allows us to have one set of rules that sort of run for everybody, because it's not really fair to compete if they have a totally different set of rules that they're using. Now, another reason why we go international is to just plain out improve operations. Different countries have different knowledge bases, like Scandinavia is known for ergonomics, Japan for production, but also for locating repair facilities nearer where the products are that are sold. So this allows us to sort of improve operations. Now, students in the past have asked me, well, what's the difference between this and improved supply chain operations? Well, remember, supply chain is all of the places where value added is occurring. And so it often has more to do with raw materials, whereas improving operations is more of a knowledge-based thing, although there is some overlap, of course. Now, the next thing is to understand markets. And so if we have these international operations with foreign customers, it's better if we locate there, because then we can understand their market a little bit better. It also reduces the response time for us. We can quickly change our product to work with what they want, of course, much quicker. And it expands the product life cycle because it enables us to stay a little longer in the various phases of the product life cycle. Now, the next one there, improve products. When we have firms working with other firms, it helps innovation. So like BMW and Toyota work together on a research project on battery technology. They've also shared knowledge on the diesel engine and how to make it a little bit better for not big trucks, but civilian cars. As you well know, other big companies share this sort of information. The battery, since batteries are so important right now, and being able to increase battery life and all that stuff, there's just a lot of really smart people and great companies working together to try to come up with better ways to make all that stuff work. So it only makes sense that if you have to go international to do it, then you just do. And then finally, to attract and maintain global talent. This is really important. Firms sometimes need people from other countries who have specific knowledge in the area in which they're talking about. Well, if you're going to attract global talent, you've got to have global talent, and you get global talent by looking internationally. So it's kind of a catch-22, but you kind of got to get on the bandwagon. And global firms need to be able to recruit and retain good employees, because they really provide greater growth opportunities and insulation somewhat, against unemployment during economic downturns. So there you go. That is the 6 reasons why firms go international, with sort of a supply operations backbone. But this should help you fill out your notes on this. And from here, we'll just move on to strategy, because understanding strategy, mission, that sort of thing with respect to operations is important. So now we understand why firms go international, and this will then play right into the strategy piece. So operations strategy in a global environment, I'm going to stop here for just 1 second and talk a little bit about this picture that's on here and kind of how all this fits together. So first of all, I think one of the important things to learn while you're in undergraduate or whatever at some point in your life is that we are all very much a product of our path in life. And even though we all have different paths and we all have had different experiences, and even though we're through the experiences, they stick with us for a really long time. We carry them with us always. So on this slide here, I'm going to talk to you about strategy in a global environment, but I'm going to tell you that much of what I talk about in class and whatever in life is sort of colored by the path I took in life. And so, as many of you know, I was an Army officer for a number of years, and I was actually a jump master in the Army, which means I jumped out of airplanes, and then I also helped other people jump out of airplanes. And while that in and of itself does not have a lot to do with strategy, it does contribute significantly to who I am. And so I would argue that it guides me in my life, and it is part of my own personal strategy. It has made me what I am. So we all have these things. Mine is, easy to take a picture of, but we all have things that have occurred in our lives that make us who we are. Companies are the same way. They have things that have occurred in their lifetime that make them who they are. They make them act a certain way. They take on, really lifelike characteristics. It's highly unlikely that a firm that has always, say, focused on efficiency is going to one day wake up and realize, let's be, really environmentally friendly and, stop worrying about efficiency. I mean, it's just not likely, because firms, like people, are very much a product of their path in life. And while you can't do anything about it, it is nice to recognize at least that our path does indeed affect our lives. So with that, let's move on then to a little bit more about strategy. So strategy for an organization, just like for people really, is sort of its plan. It's the organization's action plan. It's how it is we're going to get done whatever it is we want to do. And it really ought to come from the organization's mission. So let's just put this slide on hold here for a second and flip over here and take a look at mission. So mission is the organization's purpose. It's its contribution to society, right? It bothers me that that's out of line there. So the mission of the organization helps us understand the firm boundaries, what its focus is, why it exists, sort of what the functional areas are, how the departments fit into it. And what's important about the mission is that these things, the core values, the core purpose, the visionary goals, all of that sort of, impacts our mission, if you will. I would say that a firm mission is a lot like our value system and our own personal selves. It's sort of the broad guidelines of life. So we take this mission, this purpose, this contribution to society, and we allow this to then affect our strategy. We make a firm action plan. We look at all the related functional areas. And what I mean by that is, our mission is to use Ben and Jerry's, if you will, because we'll get to them in a minute. Our mission, is to, treat the world as if, we treat the world in a caring way, treat people in a caring way, right? So you've got to have this firm action plan that goes with that. And those actions need to be, of course, related to this mission and within these functional areas. And so it's important to understand that the that the strategy comes from the mission. So first we identify the mission, and then the mission tells us about our strategy and helps us make our strategic decisions. So it needs to be related to all the different functional areas for us. It needs to exploit opportunities and strengths, which of course I'm sure you've learned in 449 or in other classes. It needs to help us neutralize our threats and avoid our weaknesses and provide some direction to us. So let's just pause for a second and talk about the University of Maine. So I don't know the mission and strategy off the top of my head, but I am very familiar with a lot of the strategic decisions that they make. And so one of them, controversial or not, has been to recruit students from out of state. Well, this is this idea of exploiting opportunities, because there are a lot more college-age students out of state than there are in state, and it allows us to sort of neutralize our threats, which is we have an aging population and we have less people that are whatever, college age, 18, 19, 20, etc. So just that example, you can see that we want to exploit the opportunities, right? That's what we're doing, and then it helps us neutralize some of the threats. Ultimately, the strategy is made so that we can be competitive, right? That's the whole idea, right? We have to be competitive in order to make it work. And any good strategy needs to be linked to the operational decisions that we make. So let's just take a look at that, how all this works together with respect to one particular firm. So Ben & Jerry's ice cream, their mission statement, you can read it here, it's kind of long, but basically they're concerned about the social aspect, the product, and the economic mission. And kind of broadly, they're interested in operating a company that, recognizes the role of business in society without, taking advantage of the people. They want to produce their product in a respectable way, because they want to have this continued commitment to wholesomeness. And then economically, they want to have a sustainable future and be profitable, but they want to increase value for all the stakeholders, expanding opportunities for the employees as well as the executives. So with that, they then push this down to their functional areas. So here we have some ideas, some related things. So we have the economic and social justice. So they have an example is this Greystone Bakery. So the Greystone Bakery is this place that employs a lot of people in local areas, and does so in a way that they are able to give back to the community and give jobs to people with good benefits and all of that sort of stuff. So this fits with their economic and social justice mission. So that's an example of a strategic decision that they made that then fit with their mission and strategy. As well, it allows us to reduce the environmental impact because of the way they produce their products. They do it with unbleached paper and all that stuff. And they give a lot of money back to the areas that they live in. Now, we all know that Ben & Jerry's ice cream costs more than the Circle K ice cream. But some would say, and I do these little polls in class, some would say it's worth it, some say it isn't worth it, whatever. But I use Ben & Jerry's not because I am trying to peddle Ben & Jerry's, but because they're just a great example of a company that fits their mission, their strategy, and their business decisions, the business functions, all together. And I just think it makes it easier to understand. Now from there, we're going to move on and talk about some different competitive strategies. So now we're going to take this word strategy and talk more specifically about different types of competitive strategies, which is, a slight change from where we are right now. So basically, there are three major strategic typologies or competitive strategies. There is Porter's competitive strategies, there's the responder strategy, and then there's the Miles and Snow typology. And the word typology is kind of like a strategy. That's sort of the basic idea. And we're going to talk about each one of these, and you should be able to fill out yet some more things on your handout. So first, let's talk about Porter. So Porter, lovely picture of him here. He's a Harvard professor, and he has this idea, and you'll find this in your textbook, that firms compete basically in two ways, as a differentiator or as a cost leader. If you compete as a differentiator, you compete on the uniqueness of the product. And you create, through your uniqueness of the product, you create this amazing brand loyalty. And the best example of these differentiators that I can think of are clothes companies. So in high school, kids wear a certain brand of clothing. I don't know if it's Hollister or Abercrombie or whatever, but it isn't necessarily that the clothes are worth 3 times as much as the other clothes, but they have this uniqueness about them so they can be identified, and somehow they create this brand loyalty that people are willing to pay more for. Now, in some cases, the product is just better, but that isn't always the case. But be that as it may, the differentiation strategy is competing on the uniqueness of the product. Now, the cost leadership strategy is kind of the other end of the spectrum. These are the ones that maximize the value, right? They utilize the capacity as best they can. They have a really fluid supply chain, and you buy their products because they're the cheapest. I mean, that's it. We don't buy it because they're better or whatever. But the differentiator has this overarching idea that it's better than the competitive product. Now, when we talk about the operational decisions that we make as a result of these strategies, then we need to talk about some of these things. So when we talk about competing on differentiation, for example, production, we need to have pretty flexible production that's concerned with crafting unique products, because if we don't craft unique products, well, then people aren't going to pay top dollar for our whatever we're making. Delivery wise, it's got to be designed to meet the needs of the customers. They expect exact service when it's differentiation. Product development, possibly innovative, but always towards enhancing value. So they often come up with unique products, but it's more about this enhancing value and getting people to be loyal to them than anything else. And then there's product design. Here, they have to continue to create unique designs that customers perceive as valuable. That's the key point there. The customer has to think that whatever it is valuable. Otherwise, they can't charge the top dollars for it. Now, there's cost leadership here, where we have the same headings, but a little bit different focus, right? So production-wise, we're concerned with efficiency and speed and volume, not with flexible production that's concerned with crafting uniqueness. No, here we're all about efficiency. We want to deliver fast and accurately at a low cost. Product development wise, we normally let somebody else develop the product and we just copy it. We don't need to be too concerned with innovation. And then we want to simplify our production so that we can produce it, get it to market, and it can be cheap, because we're competing on cost leadership after all. So those are the two big strategic types. Now, Porter also talks about focus. So it could be geographic market, it could be a particular product. So he talks about how some firms compete on cost leadership, but they're a focused cost leader. So an example of that would be, say, Martin's, right? Because Martin's certainly competes on cost leadership, but it's focused to the state of Maine. If you aren't familiar with Martin's, you can Google it, but it's just a company that is in Maine, and they sell like closeout stuff. So they're a little bit like Big Lots, but the difference is that Big Lots is not really a focused cost leader. They're much more of a plain old cost leader, but Martin's is just focused on Maine. Firms competing on differentiation, same thing. There could be focused differentiation where you're focused maybe on a tiny segment of the market, or again in a small place. So a small, unique boutique would be a differentiated company, whereas like a small boutique that sells clothes, or it could be a small boutique type restaurant, that sort of thing. They would be sort of a focused differentiator versus a large scale differentiator. That's the big difference. Now in your textbook, they also talk about something called the response strategy. They put it right in there with Porter, but this is not really Porter's idea. I'm not really sure who came up with this idea. It definitely wasn't Porter, but be that as it may, it doesn't really matter who, but it's right in your textbook after those other two. And they talk about competing on response as being, with respect to production, they're being, the firms are very reliable, they're very quick to respond to the market, and they can make substantial swings in production in order to respond to the market. They deliver very fast, but can be scheduled about their deliveries. Product development, this is something they're really good at. They're quick to respond to the changes in the market, incorporating flexibility, whereas the cost leadership, they aren't quite as quick because they're trying to keep their costs down. And then product design, they create these new designs and innovations really fast, and this makes them really competitive. So these are the three strategies that your book talks about. That's differentiation, cost leadership, and response. Now let's just talk a little bit more about how operations management now interacts with this stuff. So when we make a decision to be a cost leader, or we make a decision to be a differentiator, this is going to affect our decisions, like about goods and services, right? We want to design goods and services that fit with our strategy, right? We don't want to design sloppy goods if we're going to compete as a differentiator. If we're going to charge a lot for our product, we need to make sure it fits the qualities. We have to decide on our quality, right? Are we going to compete as a differentiator, or are we going to go with the cost leadership strategy? You can't really do both, because if you're a cost leader and you spend too much time on quality, well then you're not going to be able to continue to compete as a cost leader. Capacity to design, of course we want to have use every inch of space that we can use. We don't want a lot of excess space if we're a cost leader, whereas if we're a differentiator, we might look at space a little bit differently. And then location and layout. Of course we want, if we're a differentiator, we want to be in the right part of town if we're going to have clients coming in and out. And if we are let me just give you a quick example on that, what I'm talking about. So in Texas, where I moved from, there's a lot of places that sell snow cones. And so there is this chain of snow cone places called Bahama Bucks, and they sell these great snow cones. And I love snow cones, and so I like to go to these. Well, in this one town I was in, Denton, they put the Bahama Bucks snow cone place right next to a tattoo parlor on one side and a bail bonds place on the other side. So it was in like a little strip mall. Well, that's just a bad place to put a snow cone place, because usually kids are going to snow cone places, and you don't really want the kids going there, with the tattoo parlor and the bail bonds places. So where you put your location for your differentiation products, you need to think about that. Of course, the snow cone place didn't make it, and I honestly believe that had they just put it in a different place, it would have been fine, but many of other ones have made it fine. So it's important to think about the location of the place that you are setting up, because it interacts with the customers. Other things that you have to continue to think about is the human resource element of job design. Like a differentiator, they usually hire people and keep them for a really long time, so you want to really make sure you got the right people. Whereas a cost leader, they're not quite as concerned about that, because the jobs aren't usually that complex, and they can hire somebody else. It's just not that expensive. So the human resource element of the differentiation, of course, is very important. Supply chain management, of course, Walmart is a great example, because they are like the best at supply chain efficiency, and they have figured out how to overcome all kinds of supply chain problems, and they are like the most efficient supply chain. they've put tons of money and energy into making an efficient supply chain, right down to owning their own truckers, or not owning, but they don't use trucking companies. They have their own fleet. So all of that makes them more efficient and keeps their costs down. Inventory, differentiators versus cost leaders. Well, cost leaders are going to sell a lot more products, and so they're going to need to have different inventory methods than a differentiator. Of course, cost leaders are going to have more inventory in general. Scheduling and maintenance, of course, another concern, right? You've got all these specialized machines for if you're a differentiator, and so you got to have really knowledgeable people. And then if you're a cost leader, you've got to make sure you're running your maintenance at night and that kind of stuff, because you can't afford to shut down whatever it is in order to fix it. So it's just so important to understand how all these types of decisions, whether you want to compete this way or that way, how that then affects these other decisions that you make. They're all interconnected is the point here. So that is a little summary of the different types of strategy. With respect to Porter, that is the differentiator, the cost leader, and the response strategy, although it's not really a strategy of Porter's, but nonetheless we're going to put it in there with them. And you should be familiar, with all of these different things and how they affect these operations decisions. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk to you about is process design and strategy. So in your textbook, there is a picture of the product life cycle and various OM strategic decisions that need to be made at certain times. And so you really need to read this in the textbook. But I just want to bring this to your attention. So let's start here with this picture you see in front of you. So basically what this talks about is product variety and product volume. We're going to get into more of that in chapter 7, but just to set the stage here, differentiators and cost leaders, they work differently with respect to process design. We typically find that firms competing as differentiators are going to have higher product variety, so they're going to be up here, and higher product volume. Now, sometimes differentiators can span from low to high with respect to volume, just depends. But job shops, which tend to be process-focused places, and mass customization facilities, which are like Dell Computer and stuff like that, they tend to work in this realm, this differentiation realm, whereas cost leaders, these are the assembly line products in life, the cars and refrigerators and some computers and whatever. So we tend to see a high volume with low variety. So understanding this and sort of how this fits into here, which is this notion of the product life cycle, what we find is that differentiators tend to be with products more in the introduction and growth phase, and that's because by the time the product has caught on, people have learned to make it cheaper, and so then the product has moved more into maturity or decline. So understanding these OM issues with respect to, say, in the introduction phase of the product life cycle, they're quite different, right? Because you're all concerned about the product design and the development and, frequent product and process changes because, things aren't going the way you want them to, you're new at it, whatever. You've got these short production runs and high cost because you're kind of starting everything from scratch. Whereas by the time you get over here to maturity, you're trying to run your assembly line at optimum capacity. So these long production runs, everything's standard, you have less problems, if you will. So the point being, firms that have products over here tend to be differentiators. Of course, there are many exceptions to this, but as a general rule, we find the products are over here in these two places more. And then as the products start to fall off and decline, other firms can make them sort of knockoffs, if you will, and they're able to compete more like a cost leader. Anyways, question number 9, really 9, 10, and even 11 they deal with this stuff, and they're really great questions because they really apply to life. So I really recommend reading this stuff and making some good sense out of it. I hope you make the time to do this. And I just was reading this question, I thought, oh, I should probably just add this to the end of the video. So here you go. This is the bit that I wanted to share with you. Now for homework, what I want you to do is, it's listed on the handout, but let me just pull that up. So for homework, what you're going to want to do, you notice here it says homework for Thursday on mine. I'm going to change it, and hopefully I'll change yours. You won't ever see it like this, but I'm going to line right through that. So you're going to need to have this complete for Tuesday. So I'll write on here, have complete Tuesday, 31 January 2017. Of course, because this video will come out on Sunday night, and then you'll want to get this done before you come into class on Tuesday. So have complete, I guess maybe I should say by Tuesday, 31 January 2017. I'll have several clicker questions about this stuff. So it's these problems here you want to do, discussion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And then also you want to do the problems from the text 2.1, 2.2, and 2.4. And you want to have a pretty, complete answer for these questions. You want to really kind of think through what you're writing, I guess, is important. Now, I've covered some of the stuff that's in these discussion questions, but not every bit of it, because some of it, you can read in the textbook. So I can assure you that if there's a question here, then it's either going to be on the test or it's going to be on the clicker questions or something. So you need to read these sections, read that page or those 2 pages or something in the text. It's very important. If, of course, you don't have the textbook yet, I have it posted to Blackboard, so you can read that if you need to. And anyways, I hope this answers all your questions, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.